The first exercise that we completed in this series was to simply stand and then to inflate our posture with bow. That is bow, B-A-O, and it means embrace. So it's a feeling of embracing all over the body. And bow is a critical component of how we physically express movement theory in Yiquan. When we express bow, even in a simple posture, we should enliven the whole body with a sense of roundedness. And this will have a distinctive form. It doesn't always have to be quite as fancy in the execution as I do it. That comes from Chen Tai Chi practice. But nevertheless, it should enliven the whole body, and it should be visible that the body is expressing bow. And this should have a particular kind of aesthetic. And observing that aesthetic and trying to reproduce it in your own body is a key teaching method in Yiquan. It's one of the ways that we resolve this rather difficult problem of how to explain to others what physical postures or movements actually feel like. And one of the things that you should look out for in people's movements is whether the posture is slovenly. So it's absolutely fine to skew postures in any direction, forwards, backwards, if it's in response to a particular physiotherapeutic need. But regardless of how the posture is stacked, it should always maintain correct aesthetic principles. And of course, aesthetics isn't the key thing here, it's just that when the posture is done right, it will express the correct aesthetic. For this posture, for example, we can see that there's a significant difference between doing the posture correctly and doing it slovenly. If you do it slovenly, you look something like a bear that's just woken up out of hibernation and is in a rather bad mood. But when you do it correctly, the whole body becomes inflated with intent. And while it's a little bit early to discuss this yet, we can say that what we're doing is holding the center, and when we do that in Yiquan, the whole body should be bristling with intent. And while this might seem a little bit abstract at this point, what we're seeing visually in the aesthetic is a body that's shimmering between open, close, rise and sink. Holding the center in this sense isn't a matter of just being completely still. And this is one of the other very important meanings of movement within stillness. The intention of the four contexts that you could issue force in any direction, because issuing force in any direction is only a matter of using either one or a combination of the four contexts: open, close, rise and sink. And when we assume bow, our whole body should be shimmering with the potential. So it's there, it's physical, we can feel it. All of those four contexts and their infinite different ways of interacting with one another are just waiting inside of us, waiting to just burst in explosive force at any second. And we can see that aesthetic difference between looking like a grumpy bear that's going to the toilet and a body that's absolutely full of shimmering, explosive intent. And it's also, by the way, exactly the same thing that we bring into more advanced movement when we're shifting between different contexts. Right, so from here our first movement is to lift the arms up in a bit of an arc. So we start in our basic bow-like posture, and then we begin to lift the arms slowly, and the slower the better. Maybe not absolutely too slow. There's a golden point where it's slow enough to be getting a really intensive sense of the movement, but if it's too slow then you don't get the sense of movement. So you've got to find the right balance, but don't do it too quickly. It's slower than Tai Chi, as my coach used to say. And we don't want to lift the arms too high, just out to the sides until we feel like you could get a medium-sized football held under your arm. And then we return them back down to the starting position. And in the first exercise that we didn't use any kind of visualization, so we'll do the same thing here. We won't use any visualization for this first exercise. Just focus on the feeling of the movement. And we also don't want to worry about any other parts of the body other than the arms and the upper body. So we'll bring in the rest of the body later on in this video. So lifting the arms up, focusing only on the arms, and getting a feeling like the interconnectedness, like there's something between your shoulder blades pulling them together as you lift the arms up. And then, well, I said we wouldn't use a visualization, but that's the feeling, and then something pushing them apart as you move the arms downwards. And the two critical things we need here are, firstly, to do the posture in complete balance. So don't skew it in any way. Try not to lift one arm faster than the other. That's a lot harder in practice than it is in theory. So you'll often see, no matter how famous the Yiquan teacher, if you see a photograph of them standing, very often they have one arm higher than the other. And as Wangshanjai student Yu Yongyan says, it's just because one half of our body is more highly socialized for use than the other, so we tend to lift it a little bit faster or hold it a little bit higher. That's one of the things, for example, that we check when we're doing Yiquan postures for health, because those little imbalances can add up into physiotherapeutic problems. So really focus on trying to get the arms moving at exactly the same rate and at exactly the same height. And secondly, we want to maintain that sense of movement within stillness that we gained when we were doing standing and we were pushing towards or against vectors. So remember, that's a particular quality of movement or stillness or movement within stillness that we're trying to get, where we don't fake it just by tensing. We use visualization normally so that we start from the absolute liminal sense of resistance, and then a feeling like we're pushing against something, but we're holding it in stillness, but now we begin to release it in movement. So we maintain that exact same quality of feeling, or we try to, and then we begin to move it with this basic posture. Okay, so let's crack on with the exercise, and we'll do 8 repetitions. Next, I'll just briefly show how I would do this posture if I was using imbalanced whole body force. So I'm shifting, well, you can't see it physically as such, but I'm shifting between open and closed. But you can see that I'm shifting the emphasis of my movement from one side of my body to the other. It's not a balanced movement. And this is the kind of training that we normally do because it's more useful for them bringing into martial arts based work. Right, let's move on into the next exercise. And what we want to do first of all is bring in a visualization. So as we're opening the arms and lifting them out to the sides, imagine that you've got something like one of those rubber exercise bands holding your arms together. So you're stretching it as you lift your arms up and out. But then with visualizations, you always have to make a decision, because if you then continue to imagine that that rubber band is there as you close your arms, it would still be providing the same pressure, i.e. pulling your arms inwards. And it really does make a difference in terms of how you feel the muscles activating and responding to it. It's not pseudoscience, you can physically feel the body's response to the visualization. So you do have to make a decision, because maybe you don't want to just continue working on the outside of your arms. Maybe you want to switch. When you're moving in, you want to feel the pressure, well, it's not the pressure, but the activation of the musculature and the sinews on the inside of the arms. In which case you need to use a different visualization, i.e. you need to imagine pressing something inwards, something resisting the arms as they come down and together. Or the visualization that I used here, and I'm going to recommend, which is simply to switch to imagining that there's the same rubber bands, but there's one on either arm and they're just pulling from the outside, so they're resisting as you move the arm in. And then, as well as a visualization for the arms, we need to start integrating the rest of the body. So the first step of that is to imagine the back pressing back against something. But again, we want to hold the movement frozen, so we don't want to actually physically lean back. But if you're like me, you'll probably find yourself just doing it a little bit. That's the power of the intent. We're so used to the intent being acted upon that it's hard to do it in stillness just through visualization. But imagine, for example, as you're lifting your arms up and out, that you're just pushing back, or there's something there just resisting. And similarly, as you push forwards and down, you feel something pushing against your chest, resisting you. But if anyone was watching you, they wouldn't actually see you leaning forwards or backwards, or maybe just a microscopic amount. And for the legs, there's a couple of things we can do, and it depends on people's level and how advanced they are. But the first and most basic thing that we want to do is, as we're lifting the arms up and out, visualize and try and feel, although it's frozen in stillness, we initiate the sense of pushing down into the ground with our feet, and not just with our feet, but with our quad, our knees and our whole lower body. And what we're doing there is we're using intent to just spark the initial phase of sink, of moving down. And from there, things get quite interesting, because we can shift our attention to different parts of our legs, the whole of our legs. We can use what we call pulse induction, where we just send our intent to a particular part of the body. And all of that depends on how skillful you are in terms of using your intent to trigger different parts of your body during standing. My advice is to just try and get the feeling of pushing down first, and then similarly, as you bring your arms down and together and you're kind of pushing forward, or visualizing pushing forward with your chest, you feel that your legs are moving in the opposite direction. They're lifting you up, so you're using rise. And the basic thing that we want is to feel every part of the body that's involved in this movement, to feel all of it knitting together. And if you can feel that, then you can start experimenting, shifting your attention to different parts of your body, but keeping it all in balance. So at this point, don't shift it to, for example, left arm, right leg. We're going to do that next. So here, just keep everything in total balance as you complete the posture. And again, we're going to do it 8 times. Next, we continue with the same posture, but this time we're going to use a visualization that links the arm on one side to the leg on the other side. And this is going to create an intentional arc within our overall posture. And intentional arcs are an idea that comes to us directly from Wang Xiangjai, only the term that he uses is usually translated as a crescent moon. For example, when you do the basic ball holding standing pole posture, you create, if you like, that crescent moon shape with your arms, and then you use visualization. Well, first of all, you use the feeling of fatigue and pain as you learn how to relax into the standing and build your resilience, and that brings the shape of that arc into your direct consciousness in relation to the rest of your body. And then as you get more resilience, you use the visualization of holding a large rubber ball to create the feeling that you're linking together, that you're knitting together the elements of that intentional arc across the top of your body. And this is very important because intentional arcs are how we transmit force to a contact point, whether it's to emit force, i.e. punch someone or strike someone, or whether it's defensively to absorb force. But critically, intentional arcs aren't how force is generated. So if, for example, you were to throw a lead hand punch with the left hand, let's say a jab, there's an intentional arc that runs from the hand down to the lead foot, which sets the posture. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the body isn't involved. In fact, the rest of the body, the whole of the body is required to generate force. And that's why we say in Yiquan, even the weight of the teeth count. But we can just pick out, for example, the right arm. If we're punching with the lead left arm, the way that the right arm pulls back and twists and uses screwing force helps to generate more Farley around the vertical axis. And we can think, for example, of Wang Xiangjai saying, the movement on the left begins on the right. And so to sum all of that up succinctly, we can say that the whole body is using unified force, but it's doing different things. It's generating force and then it's creating an intentional arc within the body to direct force to the hit point. So what we're thinking about here is the intention in the body and whole body unified force having different things that are going on at the same time. Generation of force moving into the transmission of force, or the guiding of force towards the hit point. What Wang Xiangjai calls rebound energy, but we call setting the posture. Remember that whole body unified force exists in the mind. It's part of the programming. It's one of these wonderful contradictions within each one. But it's expressed physically through the body. And just like the body can have different things going on at the same time, so the intent can have different things going on at the same time. So just like the body has a structure when we use structural movement, so the intent has a structure. It's not a single thing. It's programming that's doing a lot of very complex stuff at the same time. But for now, we just want to think about a very basic example of this. And this will help us understand how intent forms intentional arcs within what seems like balanced movements. So from our basic posture that we've been practicing all along, now we want to imagine that there's a rubber band that's linking, let's say, our left arm first to our right knee. And it provides some resistance. And we can just use that one visualization and just think of it as providing some resistance as we move our arm out and we move our arm in. And the video that's playing now is demonstrating what that would look like if we were to just do it with one arm. But we're going to do it with both. But it will give an impression of what the feeling should be like. And what we're going to do is use our intent to shift the visualization from one side to the other. So we'll do one complete movement out and in on one side, visualizing that rubber band. And you'll also feel how much the rubber band visualization helps you to create this sense of an intentional arc within an overall balanced movement, which is quite an interesting concept. And I've said before that once you really start to get this, you can just be laid down in bed and you can just visualize these things and actually feel them as if you were doing them within your body. But we'll come back to that another time. For now, the only other thing we need to think about is we can add in pushing out a little bit. As we push out with the arm, pushing out with the leg. And remember, we're doing the posture with both arms at the same time, just shifting the visualization, finding that liminal point where intent appears to become physical. And it's, well, you have to experience it. As Wang Xiangjai says, the teacher can't do the work for the student. You've got to experience it yourself. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon. Again, let's do 8 either way. I don't think I quite do 8. I think I do 6 because the dog comes back for a treat. But let's do 8 either side and just have a go of feeling that. how interesting this phenomenon actually is.